Hello everybody. When it comes to the primary family car, parents want two things: practicality and safety. And nothing screams safety and practicality quite like a 2-meter wide and 5-meter long large SUV. And that's why they've become the essential family purchase these days. The problem is that cars are very expensive to buy brand new today, and large family SUVs are incredibly expensive. However, if you're feeling brave enough to take a punt on a car which is 10 or more years old, you can get a lot of car for your money. We had a BMW X5 for 6 years. We're currently over a year into our ownership of this cheap Range Rover. However, the topic of today's video is the mighty Audi Q7. How does the Q7 stack up against the X5 and the L405 Range Rover? Which one should you buy if you've got about £15,000? Well, there's only one way to find out. My name's Ben. Welcome to Dadcars. Is that nice and snug?
Yeah.
You happy?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So in this video, we will be taking a deep dive and checking out the wonderful practicality of the Audi Q7. But the other key thing I mentioned parents look for is safety. And I'm also later on going to tell you how somebody at Audi, really dropped the ball on safety with the Q7 when it was first launched. Oh my goodness, this is tight. Oh, goodness me. And to anybody watching this who is a parent or a grandparent and you enjoy watching automotive content on YouTube, I need you to click that subscribe button. It'll take you 2 seconds, cost you nothing, but it means the world to me. Because, sweetie, what do your friends ask when they find out that you and your daddy have got a YouTube channel? What do they ask? What if we've got a
Play button.
If we've got a play button? So they don't respect us at the moment because we don't have a play button and we need to get to 100,000 subs. Anyway, come on, what are we driving? So this is a 2011 first generation facelift Audi Q7 S-Line. And this isn't a 3-litre TDI. No, this is the 3-litre supercharged petrol TSFI. Whoa! Oh. It's a give way here. So you've got to give way here to let people come through, okay? I'm just letting you know for next time, I'm not shouting at you. It's a give way to let people come up, all right? She was fuming at me.
What did she do?
She was shouting because she thought that she thought she had right of way, but it's not. Obviously, people coming up the hill have right of way. I always think it's better to explain to people when they've made a mistake as opposed to just shouting at them, because then they'll learn for next time, won't they? Oh, what was I saying? Oh yes, so sweetie, this is a V6 petrol and the engine is gorgeous, absolutely stunning. Actually, this engine is better looking than the mighty V8 that you get in like the SQ7 and the Lamborghini Urus, because that's just basically a plastic cover, whereas with this, it's a beautiful thing to behold. And in this, the Sport line, which is a Japanese import in fact, this produces 333 PS. And of course, it's got the Audi Quattro all-wheel drive system as well. Transmission is an 8-speed automatic with this old school sort of gear selector lever here, which does have a sport mode. But throughout this video, I want to compare this to the X5 that we had and the Range Rover that we've currently got, because for say sub £15,000, you could buy a used example of either one of those three. And I guess comparison number one is size. And the Q7 is the biggest of the bunch. They're all basically 2 meters wide, the other two being basically 5 meters long, but this is nearly 5.1 meters long. So it is the biggest of the three. Right, girls, national speed limit. We're in sport, currently doing just under 40 miles an hour. So we see what it's like getting up to 60. 3, 2, 1. So it took a little while to kick down there, but then briskly got us up to 60 miles an hour. I tell you what though, should we do a little 0 to 60? 3, 2, 1. Oh, it's punchy off the line, as you'd expect with the Quattro 4-wheel drive. And we're up to 60. Yes, you're not going to get stuck on any slip roads in this, despite the fact it's an absolute tank and weighs, I think, a little over 2.3 tons. What's it like for you girls in the back? How's this compare to Mummy's Range Rover or the X5?
Got a good amount of leg room.
A lot of leg room, yeah?
Yeah, I've got sweetie bins.
Sweetie bins, what, on the door cards?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. That's helpful. Keeps the car tidy then, doesn't it? And do you know what? Before we go any further and I go into how this thing drives and talk about safety and things, look, let's get the most important thing done and out of the way. Let's check out the practicality. So this is the most important test really, isn't it? Real world family practicality, because most large SUVs make the claim of supreme practicality, but when you get inside, they under-deliver. You know, our X5, for example, internally, it was no more spacious or practical than a 5 Series Touring. So let's have a look at the Q7, because I think this does something that no other large SUV does. You see, in the huge full-fat Range Rover, if you've got 2 young children who are in child seats, ISOFIX child seats, that car is effectively a 4-seater, so offers no more real practicality than if you had a little hatchback in terms of real-world family practicality. And most large SUVs are like that. However, the Q7, this one doesn't have 3 sets of ISOFIX in it. Oh no, right, well look, the party piece of the Q7 is it's one of the only family SUVs that claims to have 3 sets of ISOFIX in this middle row, but this one doesn't. Now, I don't know if that's because this is the S line or if it's because it's a Japanese import, but yeah, this one is just like all of its rivals. 2 sets of ISOFIX here in the middle row. Look, if anybody's watching this and they've got a 2nd generation Q7 with 3 sets of ISOFIX in it and they'd like to get it on the channel for review, send me an email or give me a DM on Instagram, because I need to get a Q7 with 3 sets of ISOFIX in the middle row on the channel, and just to sort of show, like, you know, in 2-meter wide vehicles, that should be a standard in my opinion. But anyway, leg room is brilliant actually, really, really fantastic. Headroom is, wow, hang on a second. I mean, if I sit right up, my head touches on the roofline there, but I think that is because this has got the panoramic sunroof, the triple section panoramic sunroof. So yeah, that's a bit disappointing. I was expecting a bit more head height there, but I'd assume if you didn't have the triple panoramic sunroof, then you'd have a bit more perhaps. But you've got dual zone climate controls here. You've got a vent on the B pillar as well. All in all, visibility is really good. And with this huge glass roof as well, it does make it feel more spacious in here, even though you don't actually have that much head height. Although, forgive me, if I've got a little bit of PTSD about panoramic sunroofs, opening panoramic sunroofs at the moment. Anyone who watched last week's video on the Range Rover, and the reason why that's broken at the moment is because of a leaky panoramic sunroof. But what other goodies have we got here? Oh look, honestly, Volkswagen Audi Group are the kings of cup holders, aren't they? I like that. But what about the 3rd row seating? Again, most 7-seat SUVs, they're no more practical in the 3rd row than the back seats of a 911. So let's have a look. Right, yeah, not too bad. However, I can already see a problem. I'm not going to have enough legroom here. I think this whole thing needs to go forward. Can you do it from the back? Oh. Let's move this forward to a point where, yeah, so look, legroom's tight, but I think that's still practical, still usable. So legroom, I'd say, is not too bad. It's headroom though. Like, I literally cannot, I can't lean my head back any more than that. My head is just banging on the roofline there. And this, for me personally, is an issue that I've got with, you know, coupe sort of styled large SUVs. I think it's a bit silly. You know, it should just be squared off. I know this is because of, you know, Audi's design language, where, you know, they're absolutely obsessed with curved designs. This has that sort of curved Audi side profile, doesn't it? But if they did just square this off, these rear seats would have been a lot more usable. Also, you would have had more headroom in the center row as well, because, you know, my head's touching on the roofline there. However, for children, this 3rd row, I think, is fantastic. Definitely a lot better than the 3rd row in a 7-seat X5, definitely. And I'm very pleased to say, well done Audi, that there's also ISOFIX on this 3rd row. there are top tether points for the third row seating as well, which is brilliant, you know, because the advice is that you should have children in even high back booster seats, which you get Isofix ones now, up until they're 12 years old or 135 centimeters tall. So, you know, you could have a couple of those booster seats in the back here rather than in the middle row, because obviously if you've got child seats in the Isofix, you won't be able to fold these seats forward because there'll be a child seat in the way. And having this third sunroof right in the back, even though I am like, you know, look, I'd have to sort of really slump down to get in here. And I guess I could actually, look, I'm underneath it now. I could have my knees up here for a short journey, but having this sunroof at the back here doesn't make it feel so sort of cramped and dark and dingy in the back, because I mean, my eldest in the back of the X5 used to get travel sick, but she'd have her own vent right here in the back, as well as cup holders on both sides too. Oh, and of course, we've got to check the boot practicality as well. So let's leave those third row seats up, because with the third row seats up in the X5, your boot is barely usable. You know, you can kind of get a folding buggy on its side and one shopping bag. So let's see what the longer Q7 has got. Okay, so that is definitely bigger. There's more space here. You can tell that, you know, it's got the extra length over the X5, but it's again, look, the styling. If this was, you know, much more squared off, you'd have much more usable boot space in the back. But if we put these down, the boot is huge. The X5, I believe, off the top of my head, 650 litres. The Q7, 770 litres, so notably bigger, but it's not as big as the Range Rover, which is 900 litres, I believe.
You know how you've put this bit in?
Yeah.
It's covered up my seatbelt.
There you go, look. There's a little cutout there, look. So you can still get to your seatbelt. But I put this cover in because young children in the back of cars, not only can the car seats themselves damage the seats, but you also drop things sometimes, don't you?
Yeah. Hang on, Daddy, look at that camera. There's a mini camera up there.
Yeah, yeah. Looks like to me that you would use that to make sure you're not curbing your wheels. So I think it's fair to say, in terms of 7-seat SUVs, a lot claim to be 7-seat SUVs, but in reality, they are for very infrequent use 7-seat SUVs. But the Audi Q7 is the best in class if you need those 7 seats. Or if, like me, you've got lots of young children, 3 or 4 young children, who all need to be in child seats, of course, you could just get a multi-Mac. The world's only 3 across and 4 across child seat. That's what we used in the X5 and in the Range Rover, so that us as a family of 6 can use the large SUV as our daily whilst having the full size of the boot. But what do we think about the Q7's looks? For me, of the 3, the Q7 is the least attractive design. Look, I know what they were doing. We're trying to have a sleek, swooping, curved Audi-esque roofline, but personally, for me, the X5 and the Range Rover both just look better in terms of a big practical family car. I actually used to really dislike the looks of the Gen 1 Q7. That was until recently. I drove a couple of the V10 C6 RS6s, which are basically the same design as this, aren't they? But because I love those cars so much, now when I see this design, I look at it more favourably. But let us know in the comments below, for you, which of the 3 is the best looking? The X5, the Range Rover, or the Q7? But what about the interior? Well, it will come as no surprise that, again, look, the Range Rover with the extended leather pack is a much more special place to be. In here, the only leather you've got is on your gear selector, the steering wheel, and your seats. These seats are wonderful though. No doubt the S-Line seats, which will be, I imagine, nicer over the entry-level ones. Yes, up here on the dash is a very familiar VAG material, which, look, credit where credit's due, this will still look brand new when this car is 50 years old, while I'm sure the Range Rover's dash will look like a haggard mess. What is far superior in this Q7 over the X5 and the Range Rover, though, is the instrument cluster. Perfection, in my opinion. 2 sets of attractive analog dials sandwiching a admittedly quite dated looking little screen there now. Looks like an old school mobile phone, but for me, this is what a dash should be like. I really don't like the big rectangular digital instrument cluster on the Range Rovers. And the X5's was, wow, very bland. The steering wheel in here though is a very pleasant surprise. A lovely size overall and the perfect size in your hand. The infotainment screen, although it looks very dated, it's not sort of stuck up here on your dash like you do in the third generation X5s. And I'm assuming like the X5, it's quite tricky to integrate it in 2025 with your smartphone. One big complaint I've got in here though is this center armrest console. Don't know if you can hear that, but it is creaking and moving all over the place. And obviously that's something that you do lean your arm on quite a lot. It's very annoying, but it was exactly the same in the X5, funnily enough. So interior wise, compared to the other two, unsurprisingly, the Range Rover is obviously the best, with I think the third generation X5 being next. However, maybe it's not really fair doing a like for like comparison with a facelift Gen 1, because this being a 2011 would be at the time of an L322 Range Rover or the second generation X5. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? There's only been 2 generations of Q7, and admittedly the X5 came out a bit earlier, but there's been 4 generations of the X5. But what is the driving experience like? Well, first and foremost, most importantly perhaps, is the ride. Because I think it's fair to say that if you've never owned a large SUV before, you might look at it and assume that, look, it's going to be super comfortable, super luxury, but that is not often the case with large SUVs in my experience. The ride in this is fairly firm and bumpy, particularly at low speeds on rough tarmac. Now, I don't know if that is to do with it being the S-Line. I thought that basically all of these had air ride systems on them, but if this car has got air ride, it's not particularly comfort focused. You'll find the same slightly disappointing ride comfort in an X5. It doesn't float around quite like you'd expect. And obviously the Range Rover being the best of the bunch. But still, even the Range Rover, honestly, on terrible British roads, you can feel more of the bumps than you'd think. But what the Range Rover does really well, it gives you an overall sort of floating nature, and it keeps you level when you go around corners. So look, we're coming up to a roundabout here. Both of my daughters are asleep in the back, so I'm gonna have to take it easy. But let's see, what is this like? Okay, yeah. So yeah, going around corners, roundabouts with a bit of moderate pace. This does lean more than a Range Rover. The thing that I always remember with the X5 is that it does a good job of hiding its weight when you're just driving around normally. You know, it tricks you into thinking that you are just driving around a normal car, not something that weighs over 2 tons. It's not until you hit a corner or you have to suddenly brake in an X5 that you're suddenly reminded, oh yes, I am driving something quite heavy. But I'd say both the Range Rover and the Q7 just feel heavy all the time. Power delivery in this V6 petrol, it's nice and punchy, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm aware that I've got, well, one sleeping child now behind me and I can't really sort of throw this figure around. But yeah, I don't know if it feels quite as punchy as the 30D X5 even, which despite having only 6 cylinders, actually in my opinion delivers performance better than the SD V8 Range Rover we've got. Oh, we've got to get around this cyclist because he's going really slow. Let's get a bit of... Yeah, it doesn't feel quite as punchy as I'd like it to be. Overall though, if you are looking for that urban family tank feel here as the driver, good visibility and all the rest of it, and that perception of safety, it definitely gives you that in bucket loads. And speaking of safety, I said earlier on, didn't I, that somebody at Audi really dropped the ball when they launched the Q7. Basically, back in 2006, when the Q7 made its big grand NCAP crash test debut, there was a bit of controversy. Let me read out what was in the NCAP report. Poor welding resulted in rupture of the footwell area. There was a separation of the seam connecting the firewall to the footwell and a failure of the spot welds in the footwell and its connecting to the A-pillar. which resulted in Audi's big new family tank getting just 4 stars. It's worth noting though that despite this, it was still awarded maximum points for the protection of child dummies, but lost a star for child occupants purely down to incorrect labelling. I wouldn't be surprised if an Audi employee back in the mid-noughties suddenly lost their job after dropping the ball on that one. But Audi insisted that this was an isolated incident, which they then rectified with Q7s that they made going forward. And certainly, I'm sure, by this, the facelift, you know, those production issues were addressed. And the second generation Q7 has gone on to achieve back-to-back 5-star NCAP safety ratings with very good percentages. But just overall, driving this right now, you are reminded why a large SUV like this is so alluring to families, because I do feel like I am driving around in a tank. And just before we move on to running costs, last thing on safety as well, if you don't already have a dash cam in your family car, this is your reminder to do so. Don't be the person who gets this reminder, doesn't do it, and then in a few weeks or months' time, something happens and you wish that you'd listened to the bold ginger bearded guy on YouTube. If you scan this QR code or use my promo code Dadcars, you'll save 15% off the entire Nextbase range. Massive thank you to Nextbase for sponsoring the Dadcars channel. Now onto running costs, and I think it's fair to say one of the biggest considerations when taking the plunge for a large family SUV like this is miles per gallon. And despite what the manufacturers claim, our 30D X5, with a lot of city driving to be fair, we used to average around the low 30s. In the SD V8 Range Rover, we're averaging around the mid 20s. But with this being a V6 petrol, have to think that this is going to be the worst of the bunch. For a tank, that turning circle wasn't as bad as what I thought it would be. Unfortunately, I can't actually give you real world miles per gallon figures with this car because Katie, who has very kindly lent it to me today, she's only had it for a little while and she hasn't actually filled up the petrol tank yet. Audi claimed that you could get like 26 on average miles per gallon. I reckon it'll be more around 20. That's what I think. But fortunately, it does have a massive fuel tank, 100 litres. But another big running cost consideration, if you are looking to buy a bargain, depreciated 10-plus-year-old SUV, is when things go wrong. And the list of common failure points with Q7s, as they are now getting older, is fairly long. Timing chain tensioner failure, intercooler coolant leaks, air suspension issues, which interestingly, of the 6 years that we had the BMW X5, replacing the rear airbag system on that car was the only thing of note that actually went wrong with it. But the long list of issues with the X5 or the Q7 will pale in comparison to what would happen obviously if you bought a Range Rover. That's kind of what I'm experiencing now after a year of ownership of that L405. And another thing to mention actually is this panoramic sunroof, because it has been said that the drains on these with the Q7s can get blocked and it can lead to flooding on the inside. And having experienced the pain of a similar issue myself recently, before I give this car back to Katie today, I will check that her roof drains are clear and free. But I think regardless of which 10-plus-year-old SUV you go for, what I say a lot on this channel I think rings true here as well. Just do your due diligence. You know, I wouldn't go and part with significant money for one of these on somebody's driveway that you've seen on Facebook Marketplace that has got like 9 owners and part service history, and the current owner's only owned it for about 6 months and he's given you some random story about why he's selling it and it's a perfect car. Katie bought this from a local reputable dealer, paid £13,500 for it, and that included a year's warranty as well. And considering, like I said, this is a Japanese import, it's got only 57,000 miles on the clock. This is a wonderful example, probably one of the finest examples of a facelift first gen out there. So summary time then, X5, Range Rover or Q7? Which should you buy if you're looking for a large family car? Well, like I said, this was £13,500. Our Range Rover is probably only worth like £13,000 now, particularly since I've told everybody that it's flooded. And we sold our 7-seat BMW 30D X5 for just shy of £11,000. So this is, money-wise, a fair comparison. First off, of the three, if I click my fingers, which one would I have right now? Honestly, I'd still have the Range Rover, even though it's been a nightmare recently. It's just so much car for the money. So much car for the money. But it would be journalistic malpractice of me to recommend to you watching this right now to go out and buy a sub £15,000 L405 Range Rover to use as your primary family car, because look, you want your primary family car to just work, don't you? So for that reason alone, I think it's fair to set the Range Rover aside. So it's a German Battle X5 or Q7. Yeah, you know what? I take it back. It is punchy enough. And I think the deciding factor will be who are going to be your passengers. You know, what age are your family? If you need a 7-seater and you're going to be using those third row seats frequently, it's the Q7. It's the Q7. If you want to be able to put 3 Isofix child seats in that center row, it's only the Q7 that you can choose. You can't do that in the X5. But of the two, for me and my family, I would choose the X5. And I would just put a multi-mac in that central row, so you can have 3 or 4 children in there, got the full size of your boot, because to my eye, it's a better looking car. And the 30D, honestly, the performance is perfect for families. What I would really love to get on the channel is an early 2nd generation Q7, because if you check the classifieds, you're starting to see them around sort of £14,000, £15,000 asking price now, and that is a very tantalising proposition. If anyone's got one, particularly if it is an affordable one, please reach out if it's got 3 sets of Isofix, and I'd love to get it on the channel. Don't forget to like this video. I know if you're watching on the telly like most people do, it's quite tricky, but it does make a difference and I would appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. A massive thank you to Katie for lending us this car again today. Should we give Katie a school run ring sticker to stick on this? Do you think she'll like that? Yeah, and maybe and a mum cars one. Oh look, there's mummy.
Mummy.
And finally, if you are like me and you've got loads of children, I highly recommend you check out this video here where I expose how most 7-seat SUVs are not actually that practical. Watch that video before you buy a 7-seat SUV, and I'll see you on the next one. Say goodbye, sweetie.